All right, everybody, let's jump into the review for chapter 5. Remember that eukaryotes have membrane-bound nucleus, and that's what the name means, eu being true, karyo being nucleus, the true nucleus, meaning that it has a membrane, nuclear envelope, as they would say. The organelles are also something that eukaryotes have. These are membrane-covered functional units within eukaryotic cells. Bacteria and archaea do not have true membrane-bound organelles. They do have ribosomes. These are not membrane-bound organelles. Ribosomes are just bits of ribosomal RNA and protein that function to read messenger RNA and crank out the associated, protein message as it reads it, right? So translates it. So that's what ribosomes would do. Let's go through the organelles that you can see in the eukaryotic cell, shall we? The mitochondria, these are the energy powerhouses. They're folds that are in there where actual aerobic respiration or energy production occurs. That's going to be the cristae. The matrix of the mitochondria is where the mitochondria's own circular DNA, which has its own genome, its own circular genome would be found in its matrix, as well as its own ribosomes, as well as those ribosomes looking more like bacterial ribosomes than eukaryotic ribosomes. They also divide on their own separately from the cell. They have to do that. If the cell divides, they would have to then themselves, control division to make more mitochondria for the new cells. So that's interesting to know about mitochondria. That those are concepts that are supportive of endosymbiosis theory, which means that originally there was a precursor organism that wasn't eukaryote, and it wasn't bacteria or archaea. It was the original precursor organism, and sorry, I had a brain fart for a minute. So the last ancestor, it's the first organism before that, before we had that separation going on. Anyways, it seems like what happened was that that organism ate up another cell, and it got some benefit from that, and then it just stayed that way, and it just as it divided, the other cell inside of it divided, and it seemed to work out for both of them. So now we have organelles that have their own genomes and stuff like that. That's pretty cool stuff. So that's endosymbiosis, and it is something, a concept that you have to be aware of for the test. So the aerobic respiration, which is generation of energy for the cell by the mitochondrial organelle, that happens along the cristae, which are the folds within the mitochondria. And that's where the actual electron transport chain exists within the mitochondria as well. And that's where aerobic respiration will occur. And get ready, because you guys will be learning about that soon, and I cannot wait. Next is the endoplasmic reticulum. This is where translation will be common, thanks to the ribosomes that will be studying the rough endoplasmic reticulum. In the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, we have production of molecules that are not proteins. So other non-protein molecules will be made there. Then we have the Golgi apparatus after that, which isn't listed on here, but it is a thing. The Golgi apparatus is where modification and packaging of these proteins would be occurring, and then moving out in vesicles, either secreting out of the cell or storing in vesicles throughout the cell. Then we have the chloroplasts. These are organelles that are important for photosynthesis. They have pigments on there that are excited by light that allow for essentially fixation of carbon dioxide into sugar molecules that can then be used to make energy by the cells. So that's a pretty interesting one as well. Then we have the nucleus, which is the membrane-bound structure that contains the genetic material. And we had mention of mitosis, which is dividing of one cell into two daughter cells that are identical, and versus meiosis, which leads to gametes, essentially. So sex cells that would be half of the genetic material, so that they combine with another one to make a whole amount of genetic material. So that is something we talked about as well. The nucleus also has the nucleolus, which is a portion of the nucleus where we're making ribosomal RNA for ribosomes. And the DNA, we'll be talking about genetics later, even though you know that for right now. So we'll get to that another time. Fungi, the fungi, these guys can be unicellular or multicellular. They have cell walls. The cell walls can be made of chitin or cellulose. Cellulose is what plant cell walls are made out of. They don't have chloroplasts. The fungi don't have chloroplast. This also, I want to be clear, yeast are fungi. Okay. And remember, yeast, they will reproduce by budding, whereas with the other fungi versions, we have the hyphae that will reproduce by creating spores. We have the, spores are asexual reproduction for the fungi. They can also produce sexually if they need to introduce genetic variation. The Protista, this is the kingdom that is going to include algae and protozoa. So algae and protozoa, they can't, all right, so I should back up. So the algae can work as, multicellular. They're not really multicellular. They are, gosh, there's a word for it and I just can't, it's just not coming to my head. Colonies, essentially, they can work together to live. Let's just say that. Cooperative living of the cells. And that's what kelp is. That's what I'm trying to get to. Okay. So kelp is algae. It looks like it's a multicellular organism, but it is not. It doesn't have true tissues. So just keep that in mind. None of the Protista do. The algae are the largest producers of oxygen on Earth. This includes the actual plankton type of algae. So they're the ones that are going to be making about 70% of the oxygen of the planet. The protozoa, these can be in all sorts of forms. They have the different kinds of locomotion. So the locomotion that we had talked about, we're using flagella to move. We talked about using cilia to move. We talked about the pseudopodia to move. It's sort of like little feet, the amoeboid movement, or not being able to move, in general, non-motile. That's how we divided up the different kinds of the protozoal organisms. We have protozoa that can exist in, all of them are going to exist in a trophozoite state. That's the free living form, vegetative form, metabolically active form, the normal version of them. Some of them are able to, most of them actually are able to make cysts, which are almost exactly like endospores for bacteria. The structures aren't the same, but the concept is the same. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So they are hardy, they are resistant. So those are going to be the cyst forms of these organisms. That's the protozoa. Not all protozoa make cysts. Protozoa, remember, those are going to include malaria. It's going to include the amoebas, the brain-eating amoebas, and other such organisms. Next, we have the helminths, and this is going to be our worms. So these are all multicellular organisms with true tissues. We have digestive tracts, we have muscular systems, we have mouths with mouth parts for attachment and things like that. Within the helminths, that kingdom, we're going to have platyhelminthes. These are the flatworms. And you do need to remember which one's which. I'm going to test you guys on this. So platyhelminthes, flatworms. So I'm like platyhelminthes, flatyhelminthes. That's how I always remember it. That's the easiest one. Then we have the cestodes. These are the tapeworms, and the trematodes. These are the flukes. Those are breakdowns of the flatworms. Trematodes, the flukes, this is subkingdom. Sorry, not subkingdom. That's a subcategory is what I'm trying to say. Underneath the platyhelminthes flatworms. So trematodes are also flatworms. The flukes are, as are the cestodes. They are flatworms. The cestodes include tapeworms like the pork tapeworm. And trematodes are going to include flukes like blood flukes and liver flukes. Then we have the nematodes. The nematodes are roundworms. I mean, they're the round ones. You can tell by looking at them that they are round. So I don't know what else to say about them. This includes Ascaris, which is like one of the most common helminth infections in the world. So the large intestinal roundworm, the long white ones, which we'll talk more about those whenever we get into the digestive diseases or whatever. So that's it for our summary for the eukaryotes. I know it was brief and there's a lot more information there, but yeah, I hope that's helping you guys remember some of this stuff. So that's important stuff. And we're done, and I will see you guys for chapter 6.